The gavel slammed, echoing like a thunderclap across the packed courtroom, rattling glasses and making jurors flinch. Olivia Reed said, "This isn't justice, it's a spectacle," her voice breaking as cameras zoomed in on her pale face. Reporters scribbled, their pens racing to capture each second. A juror gasped, gripping the wooden armrest as if steadying themselves against an unseen storm. Judge Holloway leaned forward, his face carved from stone, eyes sharp as blades. The gallery murmured, whispers swelling like rising tides. A coffee cup toppled from the hand of a trembling clerk, spilling dark liquid across polished oak. Olivia's pulse roared louder than the noise, each beat counting down her freedom. She had been a celebrated investigative journalist once, exposing corruption that destroyed empires, but now her empire crumbled. Victor Lang, the city's darling philanthropist, smiled faintly at her, his charm masking menace. The silence that followed her words pressed down like a suffocating weight. Every eye locked on her, waiting for a truth she wasn't sure she could give. The silence cracked when Prosecutor Harris said, "Tell us, Ms. Reed, were you aware of Mr. Lang's dealings before this case?" His voice was cold, slicing the room into fragments. Olivia blinked, her throat dry as dust, every heartbeat an accusation. She remembered articles she had buried, notes she had burned, secrets she had sworn never to tell. Her gaze swept across the jury, searching for one sympathetic face but finding only suspicion. Victor Lang leaned back, his cufflinks gleaming, as though this trial was theater and he the star performer. The tension pressed harder, her every pause interpreted as guilt. She said, "I knew there were whispers, but I never saw proof." The room reacted like a wound reopening. Harris smirked, pacing like a wolf. Olivia felt the walls closing in, not just of the courtroom, but of her life, her choices unraveling under relentless scrutiny. The defense attorney Eleanor Briggs said, "Objection, Your Honor, this is harassment." Her voice was fierce, slicing through the noise. Judge Holloway lifted a hand, silencing the swell of whispers. Olivia's eyes darted between them, her pulse unrelenting. Eleanor, 50s, elegant yet unyielding, locked her gaze on Harris like steel. Olivia felt a flicker of hope, but it was fragile, barely a spark in the storm. Harris sneered, adjusting his tie as if preparing to strike again. The jurors leaned in, drawn to the duel between two legal titans. "Huh," Olivia whispered inwardly, "please, just let me breathe." Yet she knew each objection, each ruling, was another step toward a fate she couldn't predict. The gavel struck again, quieter but commanding. Judge Holloway said, "Sustained. Move forward, Mr. Harris, but keep it relevant." The gallery sighed, a brief release of tension before the pressure mounted again. Olivia swallowed hard, her throat aching, eyes stinging with unshed tears. For a fleeting second, she felt protected, as though the bench's authority formed a shield around her. Victor Lang's jaw tightened, his smile fading for the first time, his mask slipping in the flicker of courtroom light. Olivia noticed, and fear mixed with vindication. Harris nodded, feigning compliance, his mind clearly sharpening the next blade. Every soul in the courtroom knew the fight had only just begun. The bailiff shifted uneasily near the door, his hand brushing against his holster out of habit. Olivia's mind replayed the stories she had written, exposés that toppled men like Lang, and how each one left scars on her soul. She whispered to herself, "This isn't how it ends," her voice too low for anyone but her to hear. The jury's eyes stayed fixed on her, some cold, others almost pitying. Lang leaned toward his lawyer, whispering something that made her shiver, his polished smile returning like a mask restored. The air thickened again, anticipation coiling tighter. Outside the windows, storm clouds gathered, the city itself reflecting the courtroom's turmoil. Inside, Olivia Reed knew this was only the beginning of her unraveling trial. The courtroom air grew heavier as Olivia Reed's memories clashed with the present. She wasn't defined by her tailored blazer or tired eyes, but by the storm of dread pounding inside her. She thought of nights spent staring at half-written drafts, pages drenched in fear she dared not print. The prosecutor's stare carved through her silence like glass. A juror rubbed their temple, sighing softly, as if weighing invisible chains. Olivia whispered inwardly, "They see me as prey, not truth." Her pulse echoed louder, each beat demanding a confession she couldn't make. She wanted to scream, but instead clenched her fists beneath the table. Eleanor Briggs glanced at her, nodding once, offering strength she didn't feel. Across the aisle, Victor Lang adjusted his cufflinks, his smirk gleaming as if he'd already won. Olivia's desperation swelled, a tide rising against walls too brittle to hold. She wasn't sure whether her silence was armor or the very noose tightening around her. Prosecutor Harris leaned in, voice dripping with accusation. "Miss Reed, did you benefit from Mr. Lang's downfall?" His tone wasn't a question but a weapon. Olivia's chest tightened, her breath shallow, eyes darting toward the jury. She saw no mercy, only judgment. Harris circled her like a predator, his footsteps deliberate, echoing off marble floors. Her throat ached as she forced the words, "I never profited from exposing him." But her voice cracked, betraying doubt. The gallery buzzed, whispers like needles pricking her skin. Victor Lang chuckled under his breath, low enough to unsettle but not be called out. Eleanor rose sharply, ready to defend, but Olivia felt the courtroom's weight pressing down, heavier than any words could lift. Her silence screamed louder than her testimony, every pause magnified under glaring lights. Inside, her outrage clawed against her ribs, begging to burst free. Yet still, she held back, caught between survival and collapse. The storm outside mirrored the one within her. Olivia's eyes locked on the raindrops, streaking the tall windows, each drop a reminder of her unraveling defenses. She remembered the day she confronted Victor Lang in print, the headline that made him stumble. Now, it was she who stumbled. Eleanor Briggs said, "The prosecution twists facts into fiction." Her words struck like sparks, but Olivia felt no flame, only exhaustion. The jury's faces blurred into one unrelenting gaze, eyes that saw guilt before proof. Victor adjusted his tie, his smirk a silent declaration of dominance. Olivia swallowed, her voice a whisper no one heard. "I fought for truth." But truth felt like ash now, dissolving between her fingers. Her silence was no longer choice but survival. Each second stretched, her heart pounding louder than the rain hammering the glass. She realized they didn't want her truth. They wanted her ruin. The bailiff shifted, uneasy with the rising tension. Olivia's fingers dug into the wooden railing, nails pressing against grain until her skin stung. She thought of the daughter she had barely seen since the trial began, her image flickering like a candle in her mind. Prosecutor Harris said, "You claim to expose lies, yet you hide your own." His words thundered, and Olivia's eyes burned. She wanted to shout her innocence, to lay bare Victor's crimes, but fear sealed her lips. Eleanor snapped, "Objection! Inflammatory!" Judge Holloway hesitated, then said, sustained. Relief was fleeting. Harris smiled, already plotting the next strike. Olivia's chest tightened, her breath shallow, heart pounding so loud she thought others might hear. She wasn't the fearless journalist now, but a cornered figure, fighting not for a headline but for her soul. She feared not just losing the trial, but losing herself entirely. A juror shifted in their seat, eyes narrowing as if weighing Olivia's every blink. She felt their gaze pierce deeper than any cross-examination. Victor whispered something to his lawyer, both smirking like conspirators savoring a win. Olivia's heart clenched as she realized her silence might be painting her as guilty. She whispered inside her mind, "If I speak, I break. If I stay silent, I shatter." Eleanor touched her arm lightly, grounding her with a gesture stronger than words. The storm outside roared louder, thunder shaking the windows as if nature itself raged against injustice. Judge Holloway's gavel struck once, restoring quiet but not peace. Olivia's voice rose unexpectedly, trembling but defiant. "I never lied about him." The gallery gasped, the sound slicing the still air. In that moment, Olivia knew her fight was no longer about winning the case, but surviving the truth's unbearable weight. The tension snapped like a wire as the first witness, Detective Mason, took the stand. Harris asked, "Did you find evidence linking Ms. Reed to tampered documents?" Mason nodded, his words crisp. "Yes, altered files were traced to her laptop." Olivia's chest seized, panic surging like fire. She whispered inwardly, "That laptop was stolen once. Anyone could have touched it." The jurors leaned in, eyes narrowing, their doubt sharpening into suspicion. Eleanor Briggs stood abruptly. "Objection, Your Honor. This testimony is circumstantial." Judge Holloway frowned, hammering his gavel once. "Overruled," he said flatly. Olivia's breath caught as the jury scribbled notes, each stroke feeling like a nail sealing her coffin. Across the aisle, Victor Lang's smirk widened, a predator savoring the trap. Olivia pressed her hands together tightly, her nails cutting into her palms as fear bled into fury. This was no longer just trial, it was survival. The second witness, a secretary named Clara Voss, nervously approached. Harris said, "Tell the jury what you overheard." Clara's hands trembled as she whispered, "I heard Ms. Reed say she'd ruin Lang's life." Gasps rippled through the gallery, the words like poison. Olivia's mouth opened, desperate to scream denial, but Eleanor's hand pressed lightly against her arm, warning restraint. Olivia whispered within, "That's a lie." Twisted from rage, "I never spoke aloud." The jurors leaned forward, their eyes darting between Clara and Olivia like judges weighing doom. Harris paced, his voice smooth as silk. "Thank you, Miss Voss. That will be all." Olivia's pulse hammered, every memory of private conversations. Suddenly a threat. Victor Lang leaned back smugly, enjoying each blade twisted in her direction. She clenched her fists, trembling under the crushing weight of betrayal. Eleanor Briggs rose, her voice slicing through the tension. "Isn't it true, Miss Voss, that you were once employed by Victor Lang's company?" Clara faltered, lips parting in shock, eyes darting toward Lang. The gallery murmured as Eleanor pressed, "And isn't it true you were dismissed for misconduct?" Clara stammered, That's irrelevant." Olivia's chest swelled, a flicker of hope igniting in her storm. Harris leapt to his feet. "Objection. Character assassination." Judge Holloway narrowed his eyes, sustained. The relief vanished instantly, crushed under the gavel's weight. Olivia whispered inwardly, "Even truth is forbidden when it threatens him." The jurors' faces were unreadable, a sea of masks offering no comfort. Victor's smirk returned, faint but venomous, as if promising Olivia that no defense could outmaneuver his reach. Her fury simmered, locked behind clenched teeth, begging to erupt. The courtroom became a battlefield of words, each strike sharper than the last. Harris asked another witness, "Was Ms. Reed known for bending truth in her articles?" The man nodded uneasily. She sometimes exaggerated details. Olivia's breath hitched, rage boiling as lies cloaked themselves in fragments of half-truth. Eleanor sprang up. "Speculation, Your Honor." Judge Holloway paused, his eyes heavy, overruled. The gavel struck again, each echo like a hammer to Olivia's chest. The jury scribbled relentlessly, their pens the silent architects of her fate. She whispered to herself, "They're burying me alive." Across the aisle, Victor's lawyer leaned close to him, both exchanging quiet laughter, a cruel theater hidden in plain sight. Olivia's nails dug deeper into her palms, until pain steadied her resolve. She realized that silence had become the rope tightening around her own neck. The storm outside roared, thunder shaking the windows as if echoing Olivia's breaking point. She turned sharply toward the jury, voice trembling but fierce. "I never lied in pursuit of truth. I fought men like him because no one else would." The gallery erupted, whispers clashing with gasps. Judge Holloway pounded the gavel, "Order!" But Olivia's words lingered, slicing the air like a blade. Eleanor's eyes widened, caught between pride and dread. Harris sneered, his lips curling as he said, "Desperation doesn't equal innocence." Victor Lang sat perfectly still, his smirk gone, his gaze locked on Olivia with cold ferocity. For the first time, cracks appeared in his mask. Olivia's heart raced, fear and fire entwined. As she realized she had crossed a line, that could not be undone. This wasn't just defense anymore, it was war. The ground shifted when Eleanor Briggs slid a sealed envelope across the defense table. "Your Honor," she said firmly, "new evidence has surfaced." The courtroom buzzed as Judge Holloway gestured for silence. Olivia's pulse thundered. Eleanor continued. "This letter was hidden, written by Mr. Lang to a woman not his wife, promising favors for silence." Gasps broke out. The gallery jolted alive. Harris barked, "Objection, unverified," but his voice cracked under the weight of surprise. Victor's face stiffened, his smirk replaced by a sharp scowl, mask splintering under sudden light. Olivia's heart pounded, relief and dread colliding. She whispered inside, "This changes everything, or destroys me faster." The jurors scribbled furiously, eyes flashing between Lang and Olivia. The letter burned like fire in the room, each word not yet read, but already damning. For the first time, Olivia saw Victor's composure falter. The predator was bleeding. The envelope was opened with deliberate slowness, its crackle echoing in silence. Judge Holloway adjusted his glasses, eyes narrowing as he read the letter aloud. Promises of wealth, promises of secrecy. The words cut deeper than any accusation. Olivia leaned forward, her breath ragged, hope flickering alive. The jurors leaned in too, expressions shifting from suspicion to shock. Harris shouted forgery. "This is a stunt," but sweat gleamed across his forehead, betraying doubt. Victor Lang gripped the armrest of his chair, knuckles whitening. Olivia whispered to herself finally, "Truth breaks through." Yet inside, fear gnawed. What if the evidence wasn't enough? What if Lang twisted this too? The gallery erupted in murmurs, energy crackling like a storm about to break. For the first time, Olivia wasn't the only one under fire. The predator was exposed. Eleanor stood tall, voice sharp. "This letter proves Mr. Lang manipulated witnesses and concealed relationships that directly affect testimony." The gallery gasped louder, the walls themselves seeming to tremble with revelation. Victor's lawyer rose, shouting, "Objection, irrelevant." Holloway silenced him with a glare. Olivia's chest swelled, breath catching as the tide shifted. Jurors scribbled furiously, no longer cold but rattled, questioning everything they'd believed. Harris stumbled, words failing for the first time, his rehearsed rhythm broken. Olivia thought, "For once, I'm not the one drowning." Victor glared across the courtroom, his mask cracking wide, rage boiling just beneath his skin. His carefully curated image was bleeding out in public, and Olivia saw it, his fear, raw and real. The trial wasn't hers alone anymore. The predator was cornered. The revelation detonated when Harris muttered, "This can't be verified," but his voice lacked conviction. Eleanor fired back, "Then let's verify. Call the witness who received the letter." Silence blanketed the room, anticipation thick. Olivia's stomach twisted as the bailiff opened the door. A woman entered, mid-30s, elegant but shaken, her eyes darting toward Victor before locking on the jury. Olivia whispered inwardly, "She's real." The jurors leaned forward, breaths held. Victor's jaw clenched, his hands gripping the table so tightly veins bulged. "No." For the first time, his charm evaporated, replaced with raw fury. Olivia exhaled, her chest trembling, as though she'd been holding her breath for years. This was no longer whispers of corruption. This was flesh and blood, truth walking into the light. The woman took the stand, her voice unsteady. "Victor Lang promised me protection if I stayed silent. He said he'd ruin anyone who exposed him." The gallery erupted, gasps colliding with whispers like thunder. Victor slammed his palm against the table, fury boiling over. "Lies." Judge Holloway's gavel hammered down, "Order." Olivia's eyes widened, the predator unmasked before all. The jury stared, stunned, pens frozen mid-note. Eleanor's gaze hardened, seizing the moment. Olivia whispered inwardly, "This is the truth I've bled for." For once the weight shifted. She wasn't the hunted alone. Victor was dragged into the light, his reputation crumbling with each word spoken against him. The room felt alive, electric, every eye fixed not on Olivia but on him. The balance had finally cracked. The air thickened as Eleanor Briggs stood for her closing argument. Her voice carried fire. This case isn't about Olivia Reed's flaws. It's about a predator who cloaked himself in charity while preying on the innocent. She paced before the jury, her words sharp as blades. Olivia's chest swelled with a fragile hope, though fear still gnawed at her edges. Jurors leaned forward, faces etched with rapt attention, pens still at last. Eleanor's eyes cut toward Victor Lang, whose smile had vanished entirely. "Power hides lies," she thundered, "but lies always find their way into the light." Gasps rippled through the gallery, tension breaking into raw electricity. Olivia's heart raced, her fists unclenched for the first time in days. She whispered inside, "Please let them believe." Eleanor's every syllable struck like a hammer, pounding truth into stone. Harris rose slowly, his voice low but venomous. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he said, "do not be fooled by theatrics. Ms. Reed is no crusader. She is a woman who built her career by destroying reputations." His words slithered through the silence, calculated and cruel. Olivia's jaw tightened, her breath caught as though he'd struck her physically. He gestured toward her. "Every witness, every piece of evidence points back to her deceit." The jury scribbled again, their faces a storm of doubt and intrigue. Victor Lang leaned back in his chair, his grin crawling back like a shadow reclaiming ground. Harris's voice rose, "If we let lies masquerade as truth, we condemn justice itself." The gavel wasn't needed, his closing cut like a blade across the room, leaving the air poisoned with doubt. The silence afterward pressed harder than any speech. Judge Holloway's eyes swept the courtroom, his gavel striking once. "We will proceed with the verdict tomorrow," he said gravely. Olivia's stomach churned, each second a lifetime stretching into the abyss. She whispered to Eleanor, "Do you think they believed you?" Eleanor placed a hand over hers, voice steady. "They heard the truth. Now we wait." Olivia's chest rose and fell rapidly, her breath shallow, her gaze fixed on the jury being dismissed. Victor Lang rose, his eyes locking on hers, no smirk now, just cold fury. She shivered under the weight of his stare. The gallery emptied slowly, murmurs filling the halls, storm clouds beyond the windows echoing the turmoil inside. Olivia closed her eyes, clutching the rail, praying the storm outside didn't foreshadow her destruction. That night, Olivia sat in her small apartment, city lights flickering through rain-streaked glass. She stared at old clippings on her wall, headlines from victories past, now yellowed with time. Her reflection in the window was fractured, pieces of a life unraveling. She whispered, "If I lose, everything I fought for dies with me." Her phone buzzed with anonymous threats, the screen glowing like a dagger. She silenced it, too tired to fight unseen enemies. Memories of her daughter's laughter pierced her chest, sharper than any testimony. Olivia pressed her forehead to the glass, watching storms lash the streets below. The trial had bled into her veins, poisoning even her silence. She whispered again, "This has to end tomorrow." Fear curled in her gut, but somewhere in the storm's roar, defiance still flickered. Morning arrived with gray skies and heavy air, as Olivia stepped back into the courtroom. The gallery buzzed, tension thick enough to choke. She felt every eye on her, each whisper a dagger. Eleanor sat poised, her calm defiance radiating like armor. Harris flipped his notes with smug precision, preparing for the kill. Victor Lang adjusted his tie, mask restored, but cracks still lingered at the edges of his eyes. Olivia whispered to herself, "They'll decide who I am today." Her pulse hammered as the jury filed in, each step echoing like a drumbeat of fate. Judge Holloway's gavel struck once more, the sound final, chilling. Olivia clasped her hands, her knuckles pale, as silence swept the room. The climax had come, the verdict was ready to be spoken. The courtroom froze as the jury foreman stood, paper trembling in his hands. His voice cracked. "We find the defendant, Olivia Reed, not guilty." Gasps erupted, some filled with relief. others with outrage. Olivia's eyes flooded, her hands gripping the rail as if anchoring herself against the surge. Eleanor Briggs exhaled, her jaw unclenching, a rare smile flickering at the corner of her lips. Harris dropped his pen, his jaw tightening, his blade dulled at last. Victor Lang's face twisted, fury breaking through his carefully built mask. A predator denied his final kill. Olivia whispered, "I can breathe," though her voice was drowned in the roar of the gallery. The sound of the gavel cut through, Judge Holloway demanding order, but the chaos refused to quiet. Olivia's chest heaved, her world shattering and reforming in the same instant. The trial was over, but its shadows lingered. Outside the courthouse, a storm of cameras exploded like fireworks, flashes cutting through the gray daylight. Reporters shouted questions, microphones thrust forward like spears. Olivia shielded her face with trembling hands, her blazer soaked by drizzle. Eleanor pressed through the crowd, her presence a shield, yet even her sharp commands couldn't silence the frenzy. Olivia whispered, "I'm not your headline," but her words vanished into the chaos. Victor Lang emerged moments later, his suit immaculate, his smile resurrected for the press. Justice was denied, he declared, voice steady, gaze piercing directly at Olivia. The crowd roared, reporters devouring every syllable. Olivia's breath faltered. Freedom felt like another cage, this one built of flashing bulbs and hungry eyes. The rain poured harder, masking her tears, as she realized the trial had ended in law, but not in life. That night, Olivia sat alone in her apartment, silence deafening after the chaos. The verdict echoed in her mind, words both liberating and haunting. She stared at a glass of untouched wine, hands trembling too much to lift it. Her wall of clippings loomed, each headline a reminder of wars fought and scars earned. She whispered, "What good is truth if no one believes it?" Outside, sirens wailed faintly. The city's noise a reminder that life moved on, indifferent to her battle. She closed her eyes, seeing Victor's glare burned into memory, a promise that the fight wasn't over. The storm outside had cleared, leaving the city washed but not cleansed. Olivia breathed shallowly, caught between relief and dread. She was free, but far from safe. Eleanor visited later, her footsteps steady, her voice soft. "You survived, Olivia. That matters." Olivia looked up, eyes rimmed red, whispering, "Did I? Or did I just trade one prison for another?" Eleanor sat across, her sharp edges softened in rare vulnerability. "You told the truth. That doesn't erase scars, but it keeps you alive." Olivia's shoulders shook, her tears silent, her hands clutched in her lap. Eleanor's gaze lingered, a silent oath of protection. Olivia whispered, "He'll come back for me." Eleanor replied firmly, "Then we'll be ready." Outside, the streets were quiet, the storm replaced by eerie calm. Olivia leaned back, her exhaustion a weight heavier than victory. For the first time, she allowed herself to cry. Morning broke with a muted sun, light bleeding through Olivia's blinds. She sat by the window, coffee cooling in her hands, her eyes heavy but unblinking. On the street below, neighbors passed unaware, their lives untouched by her storm. She whispered, "Freedom feels emptier than I imagined." The radio hummed faintly in the background, news anchors already spinning narratives, her name still their currency. Victor Lang's voice played on loop, his public statement framing her as the real villain. Olivia set down her cup, her hands trembling less now, her jaw firming. She whispered to herself, "I survived this trial, but war doesn't end here." Outside, the sky brightened, clouds parting slowly, hinting at fragile dawn. Olivia's silhouette remained still, haunted but unbroken. The city awoke under pale skies, but Olivia Reed walked the streets like a ghost. People passed her without recognition, though her name had been on every front page yesterday. She whispered, "Fame fades faster than fear." Her coat clung to her shoulders, rain clinging to the fabric. Her eyes darted at shadows stretching along brick walls, half expecting Victor Lang's hand to reach out from one. At a cafe window, she caught her reflection, a woman aged by fire but still standing. She pressed a palm to the glass, whispering, "I'm still here." Inside, laughter rose from strangers, untouched by her trial. For the first time, she felt both invisible and exposed. Her steps slowed, her chest heavy, yet she didn't stop. Survival was no longer enough. She had to decide what came after. Later, Olivia visited the grave of her father, the man who once told her truth was heavier than stone. She knelt, the earth damp beneath her, whispering, "I carried it, even when it broke me." Her fingers traced the carved name, trembling as rain soaked her hair. The silence of the cemetery wrapped her like a shroud. In her chest, pain swelled, but with it came strange peace. She thought of her daughter, waiting for a mother who had been absent too long. She whispered, "I'll come home." Her tears fell freely, sinking into the soil. Behind her, the world was quiet, save for the rustle of trees in the wind. She wasn't absolved, but she was alive, and the dead could no longer judge her. The living still might. At dusk, Olivia sat in her daughter's room, toys scattered where she had left them weeks ago. The child's laughter rang as she ran into her mother's arms, clinging as though afraid to let go. Olivia whispered into her hair, "I'm sorry I left you in the storm." Tears wet her cheeks, but this time they carried warmth. The girl looked up, asking softly, "You're staying?" Olivia nodded, her voice breaking. "I'll never leave again." The trial had carved scars across her life, but here was something worth healing for. In that small room, Olivia's chains loosened. She held her daughter tighter, aware the world outside was still sharp with threats, but in that moment, she was whole. Elsewhere, Victor Lang stood before cameras again, his voice commanding, his smile rebuilt. "Injustice has been served," he declared, words dripping with venom. The crowd cheered, reporters scribbling, feeding on spectacle. Yet behind his eyes flickered rage, a predator wounded but not slain. Olivia watched from her living room, her daughter asleep on her shoulder, the screen glowing like a silent threat. She whispered, "He's still out there." Eleanor's words echoed in her mind, "Then we'll be ready." Olivia muted the television, choosing silence over his lies. Her chest rose slowly, steadying with resolve. The war wasn't over, but tonight she chose peace. Night fell, the city lights glowing like restless stars. Olivia stood by her window, watching the streets below. Her reflection stared back, eyes lined with sorrow but alive with fire. She whispered, "The trial didn't end me. It remade me." Her fingers pressed against the glass, the city buzzing beneath, unaware of the quiet wars still raging. A single tear slid down her cheek, not from fear, but from the weight of survival. Final words lingered in her chest like smoke. "Justice is never clean, but I'll carry it anyway." She turned from the window, the screen fading to black, leaving only silence.